Hello friends, today in this session we are going to discuss about CEA. So CEA means Central Electricity Authority. So that is under Government of India, Ministry of Power. So actually in this CEA there are various regulations, and the regulations like construction standards, transaction of business regulations, metering regulations, grid operation standards, statistics and return standards, connectivity regulations. So in other laws or in the acts and rules, the specific focus and specific rules and regulations are there. But in this CEA rules or the regulations, there are variety of standards. And that is why with reference to that focus only, we have to refer that particular standard. So suppose under the CEA, if it is related to the electricity or the power, and that is related to the construction only, then we have to refer the construction standards. So for the construction of power station, for the construction of poles, for construction of substations, construction of other infrastructure which are required under these power lines, transmission, distribution, etc. If it is related to the meters, so whether the meters are analytical one, the old one, whether we have to replace that meters by smart meters or the digital meters, how to do that, what are the charges, then where it is to be applicable, all these things are related to the metering regulations. So we have to refer that metering regulations. If it is related to the transactions of business regulations, so in case if you want to discuss or do some activities which are related to the business, then we have to refer this transaction of business regulations. In case if you want to refer the grid operation, so we have to refer that grid operation standards. And for the statistics on the daily basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, and annual basis, and what exactly the returns are. So all these things are related to the statistics and return standards. And if any issues are there, if any problems are there, or if any new guidelines are there, and we have to implement or execute these new guidelines which are related to the connectivity, then we have to follow the connectivity regulations. So this is all about the basics or the standards or the regulations which are involved under this CEA. So it is not possible to discuss each and every regulations with their amendments in a single session. So I will just focus on the safety related regulations or the safety measures aspects with related to this CEA, and I will give a brief idea what exactly the functions of this CEA is. So the functions for this CEA is with reference to the Section 73 of the Electricity Act 2003. So all these things are designed with reference to the Section 73 of Electricity Act 2003. So in one of the session, we have discussed in detail what exactly the Electricity Act 2003 is. Then the functions are well under the Section 3 of National Electricity Policy and Plan. Section 8 is from hydroelectricity generation. Section 34 is grid standards. Section 53 is provision relating to the safety and electric supply, and Section 55, that is use of meters, and Section 177, making of regulations. So all these sections with reference to the Electricity Act 2003, so with reference to these sections, they have mentioned the guidelines in detail and some of the specific functions, what to do, who is going to do, what are the appointments, what is the eligibility, qualification, etc. So these are the main reference sections from the Electricity Act 2003, where from they have constituted the CEA. That is, the constitution of CEA, Central Electricity Authority, is with reference to the section 70 of this Electricity Act 2003. In that, there are some members, near about 14 members are there in this CEA under, and there is one chairman, and central government, state government, and experts are involved in this 14 members committee of this CEA. And then they have decided and discussed the various aspects which are related to the powers. So the functions of this CEA related to the section 73 or duties of this CEA members are: advise the central government on the matters relating to the national electricity policy, right? Then formulate the short-term and perspective plan for development of the electricity system and coordinate the activities of the planning agencies. Then specify the technical standard for construction of electrical plants, electrical lines, connectivity to the grid. Then some safety requirement for construction, operation, and maintenance of electrical plants and electrical lines. Some grid standards for operation and maintenance of transmission line. Then conditions for installation of meters for transmission and supply of electricity. Then to promote and assist the timely completion of the schemes and projects. Then promote measures for advancing the skill of persons engaged in the electricity in the electrical industry, and then advise the central government on the matter on which the advice is sought. Then collect and record the data concerning regarding the generation, transmission, trading, distribution, and utilizations of electricity, and carry out the studies relating to the cost, efficiency, competitiveness, like matters, and make public from time to time the information secured under this act. So publication of reports, investigations, then promoting research in matters affecting the generation, transmission, distribution, and trading of electricity, carry out or cause to be carried out in investigation for the purpose of generating or transmitting or distributing the electricity. Advise the state government also regarding the licenses, generating the companies, and advise the appropriate government and the appropriate commissions. Then discharge such other functions as may be provided under this act. So these are the different functions and duties about this CEA with reference to the section 73. So we will discuss the safety precautionary measures related to that, and there are some guidelines or regulations. So this is one of the regulation, that is CEA, Central Electricity Authority, measures relating to safety and electrical supply, regulations 2010. Now in this regulation also there are a variety of chapters and various rules, so we can't explain each and every one, but from this title itself you can understand what exactly the contents of this CEA regulation 2010. For example, in the chapter 1, the definitions, short title and commencement. So this is the basic requirement in all the rules and regulation. Then chapter 2, under that, designating the persons to operate and carry out the work on electrical lines and apparatus. So under this rule, the main duty and the focus is on the electrical line work and their apparatus. Then how to operate this work, how to use this electrical apparatus, all these things are given under this rule number 3. Then rule number 4 is related to the inspection of designated officers and other safety measures. So he is going to designate as an officer for the inspection purpose, because all these electrical lines and power lines, transmission, distribution, etc., all these works are having electrical hazards. And in most of the cases in the electrical accidents, many fatalities are there. So here high hazard is there. That is why the inspection by the supervisor or the expert is very necessary. And for that purpose, we have to designate some inspection or inspectors for a particular work. Then electrical safety officers. So we already know that this electrical safety officer should be from the electrical background. That is electrical engineering diploma or engineering graduate. In the old rules, in the 2010 also, they have mentioned that engineering graduate with 10 years experience and engineering diploma with 15 years experience criteria is there for the electrical safety officer. But I will show you then that this 5 and 5A is modified in the 2018, and in the 2018 the latest requirement is diploma engineer, that is electrical engineer with 10 years experience, and electrical engineering graduate with 5 years experience is also eligible for this electrical safety officer. So we know what the duties of this safety officer, but now these duties of safety officer is from the electrical point of view. So safety measures for operation and maintenance of electrical parts, that is rule number 6. So whatever the operations are carried out in the electrical plants, whatever the maintenance processes are carried out in the electrical plants, so that should be safe, that should be inspected or supervised by the experts, and then only that should be carried out. Then safety measures for operation and maintenance of transmission distribution systems. So the previous rule is for the electrical plants. Now it is focused on the transmission distribution systems. So that may be nearby or far away from the main stations. So we have to observe all these activities. We have to take measures while maintenance and operating all these transmission and distribution activities. Then keeping of records and inspection thereof. So whatever you have observed in the electrical plant or in the transmission work or in the distribution system works or in the storage works, whatever it may be, all these things should be recorded first. And then we have to observe, is there any corrective actions or is there any valid suggestion is there, then we have to implement also. Then deposit of maps, deposit of printed copies. So we have to store all these things in a printed form nowadays as well as in the soft copy form. Then plan for area of supply to be made and kept open for the inspection. So we have to plan that we have to do this type of inspection. We have to do this inspection in that area in that particular time with the help of that, and we have to record all these things. Then chapter 2 is related to the general safety requirements. So these general safety requirements pertaining to construction, installation, protection, operation, and maintenance of electric supply line apparatus. So all these general safety requirements are related to these activities, which is given in rule number 12. Then service lines and apparatus on consumers' premises. So it is on the consumers' premises or point of view now. So all these service lines and apparatus and what exactly the technical specifications of that, then what are the requirements, what is the distance between these various lines, what is the height of that line, what are the apparatus to be used, all these things are given under this 13. Then switch gear on consumers' premises. So special precautionary measures and guidelines are given related to the switch gear in the 14. Identification of earth and earth neutral conductors, and position of switches and switch gear therein. So earthing and bonding provision we all know. So all these earthing provision, what exactly the Ohm resistance, what is the procedure, exact procedure for this earthing, and the earth neutral conductors, all these things are given under this 15. Then earth terminal on consumer's premises, now it is at the consumer's end. Then accessibility of bare conductors, which bare conductors to be accessed, how to access, what are the standard or operating procedures. Danger notices related to these electrical installations, etc. all are given under this 18. Then handling of electric supply lines and apparatus. So how to handle these electric lines, how to handle these apparatus, all these things should be given to or trained to the workers who are actually use this apparatus and perform various work on the electric lines. Then there may be a supply to the vehicles and cranes also. If it is needed, then which supply is suitable for that particular vehicle and crane should be identified, should be studied, and then only we have to give the supply. Then cables for portable or transportable apparatus and cable protected by bituminous materials. So all these cable related activities, what exactly the material of construction is, what is the thickness of that cable, what is the current capacity of that cable, what the voltage supply required for that cable, all these things should be studied first, and then only these cables are to be provided. Then street boxes, distinction of different circuits, distinction of the installations having more than one feed, and accidental charging. So these are the various parameters on which the rule number 23, 4, 25, 26 is going to focus. Then provisions applicable to protective equipment. So we have to use specific protective equipment here, as it is electric lines, electric supply, then we are using the transmission, distribution facilities, etc. Then we have to use electrical insulated apparatus. Somewhere we have to use anti-static tools. Somewhere we have to use proper earth ladders or the scaffolding, etc. Sometimes we have to use anti-static shoes, etc. So depending on the conditions, we have to use this specific protective equipment only. Then display of instruction for recitations of persons suffering from the electrical shock. So sometimes there is a digital apparatus which are available for protecting these electrical shocks. If it is the accident, then we have to protect that person from this electrical shock, and we have to try for the non-fatality case. So for that purpose, nowadays, various instruments regarding these electric shocks are also available. In case if it is not available, then we have to try for the CPR also. But only who had already gave the training regarding the CPR, who has already know about all these things after the electrical shock, what exactly should we do, that person only is going to handle that situation. Then precautions to be adopted by consumers, owners, occupiers, electrical contractors, electrical workmen, and suppliers. So all these precautions related to these things are given under this 29. Then periodical inspection and testing of installations is given under 30. Testing of consumers installation and testing of generating units are given in 31 and 32. Then chapter 4 is focusing on the general conditions relating to the supply and use of electricity. So what are the precautionary measures against leakage before connections? So before connecting to the residential area or MIDC or industries, etc., we have to check the leakage first. Then leakage on consumers' premises. Then supply and use of electricity. So how to give the supply to that particular consumer. So that should be checked. What exactly the requirement, whether it is one phase requirement, whether it is three phase requirement, whether it is 240 voltage requirement, whether this is 1 kV requirement, 11 kV requirement, whatever it may be. So what exactly the requirement of that supply. So then only we have to supply that electricity to the particular consumer. Then provisions for supply and use of electricity in multi-store building more than 15 meters in height. So now in this case, we have to follow more precautionary measures as the height is more. So more than 15 meters in height, we have to go at higher height than we have expected. So again, we have to check the safety provisions. We have to check the safety way of handling all these wires or the electrical lines at that particular height. Then conditions applicable to installations of voltage exceeding 250 voltage. Now there are variety of categories. So there are specific installations that is for 250 plus voltage. Normally in the residential area, if you check the voltage of our residential area, then normally at our home, 210 to 240 volt is the supply, right? So that is residential one. Now more than 250 volt, so that is a different case. So for that, no 250 volt plus, then for 650 plus volt, then for other voltage requirements, different apparatus and different safety precautionary measures should be followed. So for 250 plus, the guidelines are given under this 37. Then appeal to electrical inspector in regards to defects. So in case if anything is happen, if any leakages happen, or if you want some guidelines to solve some issues, all these things should be handled by that electrical inspector. Then precautions against failure of supply and notices of failure. So in case if any failure is there in the supply, then why this failure is there, how to solve that, and where to give the notice. So all these things should be given in the 39. Then chapter 5 is related to the safety provisions for electrical installations and apparatus of voltage not exceeding 650. So it is less than 250 in the previous one. Now it is 250 plus, but less than 650. So that is the range. Then again, so different guidelines are given, that is for the test of resistance of insulation, connection with the earth, then earth leakage protecting devices. Because now this is the 250 to 650 volt criteria. So again, we required different things for the earthing, for the insulation's purpose, and different material of construction, apparatus and devices should be used. Then chapter 6 is related to the voltage exceeding 650 plus. So this is another criteria, and all these things which are working under the 650 volt plus criteria should be inspected by this electrical inspector again. And in case if anything is happen, if any guidelines is required, if any issues are there, then all these things can be handled by that electrical inspector. Then interlocks and protections of use of electricity at voltage 650 plus guidelines are given. What exactly the interlocks provisions are there, then how to protect these 650 plus lines, and how to avoid the accidents related to these 650 plus lines. All the testing procedures, all the operations, all the maintenance procedures, what exactly the maintenance is, how to follow the maintenance procedures, what are the exact steps of this maintenance, all these things are given in the 46. Then precautions to be taken against excess leakage in case of metal sheath electric supply lines. So in case if the leakage is there in the metal sheath electric supply lines, then what exactly the precautions to be followed, that is given under 47. Then connection with earth for apparatus exceeding 650 plus, Now the earthing provisions for the 650 plus electric supply is different one than the previous one, that is 250 to 650, and again that is differ from the less than 250. So general conditions as to transform and control this electricity, general conditions are given under 49. Then pole type, substations, condensers, then luminous tube sign installations for the 650 plus lines, but not exceeding 33 kV. So different equipments are going to be used for the 650 plus lines, and if it is 650 plus but less than 33 kV, then another or other provisions, other precautionary measures, other apparatus, other equipments are going to be used, because each apparatus, each equipment and all the guidelines are differ for the different lines. So we have to check what exactly the voltage of that line is. Then supply to electrode boilers of voltage exceeding 650 but not exceeding 33 kV. Now it is special provisions for the boilers. So the boilers which require 650 voltage plus but less than 33 kV, so that guidelines are given under 53 rules. Then 54 is related to the X-ray and high frequency installations. Then chapter 7 is related to the safety requirements for overhead lines, underground cables and generating stations. So what are the safety provisions? What are the safety requirements for the overhead lines, underground cables and generating stations? So each and every cable or these lines are different one, because for the underground there were different requirements. For the overhead lines there were different requirements. So for the generating station also there were different requirements. Then material and strength. So as we know that for different electrical supply, for different voltages, the material and the strength of that line is different one. Then the joints, if any there, if joint is required, and if it is not available, then how to do these joints is mentioned under this 56. Maximum stresses and factors of safety, that is FOS, all these things are given under 57. The clearance above ground of the lowest conductor of overhead lines, then that is given under the 57. Then 58 is related to the clearance above ground of lowest conductor of overhead lines. 59 is related to the clearance between conductors and trolley wires. Then 60 is related to the clearance from buildings of lines of voltage and service lines not exceeding 650 volt. 61 is related to the clearance from buildings of lines of voltage exceeding 650. So these are the different clearances of these lines. So that may be a line less than 650, that may be a line exceeding 650, that may be a clearance between these buildings and that lines, and all these guidelines are given between this 58 to 61 regarding the clearance. 62 is related to the conductors at different voltages and same supports. So what exactly the conductors, what are the type of conductor, what is the method of construction, so of that conductors, all these things should be think about at different voltages, because for different voltages, different type of conductor, different size and shape of conductor, different material of construction, everything should be thought of, and then only that suitable conductor is going to supply for that line. 63 is related to the erection on alteration of buildings, structure, food banks and elevation of roads. So while transmission, while distribution of these electrical supply, we have to think of all these points, that is given under 63. Then transporting and storing material near our lines. So sometimes we have to transport this material through the road. Sometimes we have to transfer these lines or the material through other trucks or the buses or the road facility. And if it is important, then we are going to transfer this material by air also. So there may be a different requirement for the different things, but we have to take care about all these materials. That may be a electrical wires, electrical lines, that may be apparatus, that may be a equipments which are used for all these purposes. Then there are some guidelines related to the general clearances, that is for general guidelines, but there is a specific clearance guidelines for specific lines, because less than 250, more than 250, but less than 650, more than 650, but less than 33 kV. All these lines are required different clearance, and that is why we have to follow all these specific clearance guidelines also. Then routes proximity of aerodromes, that guidelines is given under 60C. Then maximum interval between these supports, what exactly the guideline should be, that is covered under 67. Then telecommunication lines and power lines, if these both lines are there, then how to fit these lines, what exactly the distance between these lines, what are the precautionary measures are given in 68. Lines crossing or approaching each other, and lines crossing street and road. So again, if you cross the road, if you want to cross the street for continuous supply of these lines, because normally we are also observing these things on the state highways or the national highways or the normal roads, sometimes through the village area, sometimes through the farming, etc. So we have to follow all the guidelines regarding this line crossing. Then guarding. So what exactly the guards should be provided for all these lines, and what is the material of construction, what are their resistance, all these things should be thought of. Service lines from overhead lines, that is given under 71. What exactly the earthing requirements, what is the specific ohm requirement, what exactly the procedure for this earthing, all these things are given under 72. Then 73 is related to the safety and protective devices. So we have already mentioned that for these electrical supply lines, especially we have to focus for the electrical insulations devices. Then protection against lightning, that is another requirement. So generally we use the protecting lightener at the top of that particular station or substation or the building or the tower, what exactly the structure at that, then that is to be connected to the earth for the neutralization purpose. Then unused overhead lines. So if the overhead lines are not in working, or if it is not connected, then how to use that overhead lines which are unused, or how to store these overhead lines which are unused. Then laying of cables. Sometimes it is happen that while supplying these cables or while connecting this cable, while crossing the roads or some buildings or some farms, etc. So these things or the problem may happen. So how to handle these situations? So we have to take the guidance from the electrical inspector, and we have to solve that problem. Otherwise, there are more chances of accident. Then 77 is related to the protection against electromagnetic interferences. So sometimes that is another point which may cause an accident, but it is a rare case. But when the voltage or the kV supply is more, then there are more chances or the risk is more related to this electromagnetic interferences. Then chapter 8 is related to the safety requirements for the electric traction specifically. So what exactly the application of this chapter, voltage of supply to the vehicles, insulations of lines, insulation of returns, proximity to metallic pipes, then difference between the potential on return, leakage on conduit systems, then leakage on system other than the conduit systems, passengers not to have access to electric circuits, isolation of sections, minimum size and strength of trolley wire, height of trolley wire and length of span, earthing of guard wires, proximity to magnetic observations and laboratories, and all the records which is inspected or observed by the electrical inspector or the representative of that particular government or that committee. So all these things are covered under the rule number 78 to 92 under the safety requirements for electric traction. Then chapter 9 is related to the safety requirements for mines and oil fields. Now, these are the special applications, special provisions for the mines, because we know that for these mines, underground work, then digging of particular earth at a particular depth is going on. Sometimes normally we know the common mines are coal mines. Sometimes the other mines are also there for the metal extraction, etc. And for these fields or for the oil field also, there may be some special precautionary measures, because in the oil fields also there is a hydrocarbon, and if any spark or if any line is leak in that field, then there is a chance of fatal accidents. There is a chance of major accidents. And in the coal mines also, that coal is again hydrocarbon, and that is why we have to take special precautionary measures for these mines and oil fields. So application of chapter, then responsibilities for the observance, notices related to these coal and oil fields, then plans, lighting requirement, overhead lines, communication, fire precautions. Now, this is the specific provision which is mandatory case. So for the case of fire accidents, we have to take care about the firefighting equipment, then firefighters, and the trained people regarding these to handle these fire equipments. So there may be a provision of fire hydrant systems, fire extinguisher systems, then sprinkling systems, automatic sprinkling systems, and we have to use sometimes the dry chemical powder or foaming agents for extinguishing this fire. Generally, even though we are saying that for the electrical lines, we should not use the water, but generally when the fires are at small quantity, then only we have to follow these practices. But when the fire is at large scale, then we have to use water again. So if it is the case, if it is the provision that if there is a foam is available, if the DCP is available, then we have to opt for that. Otherwise, we have to use water also. So nowadays, some fog systems, some sprinkling systems, some specialized atomizer, etc., are used to extinguish these types of fires. Then isolation and fixing of transformer and switch gear, method of earthing, protective equipment, earthing metals, voltage limit, transformer, switch gear, terminals, disconnection of supply, cables, flexible cables, portable and transportable machines, sundry precautions, precautions where gas exists, short firing, signaling, haulage, earthing of neutral points, supervisions. All these points are mentioned under this chapter 9, which are specially related to the coal and oil fields. Then chapter 10 is related to the miscellaneous. So whatever the points which are not covered under the up to chapter 9, that should be covered under this chapter 10. So the deviations under these points, whatever miss under that chapter 9, that should be included in the miscellaneous part. So this is all about the CEA 2010, right? So this is chapter 1. All these say, point number 2, all the definitions. Different definitions are covered under these things. So after ZZG, so up to that, these number of definitions are there. Then under chapter 2, that's the designation persons, etc. So what exactly the provisions are there? Inspection of designated officers, electrical safety officers. So that is, I have highlighted because this provision is now changed. So in the previous provision, that is in the CEA 2010 provision, here it is clearly mentioned that engineering, electrical engineering graduate or degree, at least 10 years experience. And here electrical engineering diploma, at least 15 years experience. So in the 2018 amendment, that is changed to the 5 years experience for graduate and 10 years experience for the diploma. Then these are the safety measures, operation and maintenance, electrical plants. Then this is about transmission distribution systems. Then all the keeping records, then maps, printed copies. Then plan for the area inspections. Sometimes we are using now GPS systems also. Under this chapter 3, that is important, general safety requirements. So we have discussed all these things and all the regulations. This is 13, service lines, apparatus, consumer promise, switch gears, 14, 15 is related to the earthing provisions and neutral gear, etc. So all these are the details about these rules and regulations under CEA 2010. So it is not possible to discuss each and every point in detail. That is why you can go through all these points for the details. And I'm going to show you only the changes in the 2015 and in the 2018 under this CEA 2010 rule, right? So these are the different categories also. I just show you the diagram or table. This is the minimum clearance in meters between these lines crossing each other. So different provisions are there for different kV lines. So for 11 to 66, 110 to 132, 220 kV, 400 kV, 800 kV. So different clearances are mentioned. So if low and medium is there with 1166 kV, then 2.44 in meters. If it is 1166 and 1166 only, then again minimum is 2.44. So if you observe the 800 kV and 800 kV, then 7.94 is the clearance between these things. That's 7.94 meters, right? So likewise, different guidelines are given in details. So this is the minimum clearance in meters between AC and DC lines. So this is the criteria. So for 100 kV, 200 kV, 300, 500, 400, 600 kV DC lines, and these are the AC lines in the kV. So that is again 7.94 is the maximum clearance for all these things. Then different provisions I have already mentioned, that is related to the guarding. These diagrams are given. Then earthing provisions, overhead lines, then underground systems, and another chapters related to that. So all these provisions are mentioned in various chapters, in various rules.